is live on our emish.edu/visit website. Be patient with us, as right now we are only offering those to summer 2021 and fall 2021 admits and applicants, trying to make sure that our seniors and our students that are, trying to make those decisions right now for summer and fall are able to get on campus. But there will be opportunities for everybody else to get on campus as well. We are hopeful that this is going to continue to move in a forward direction, and we are excited to have you. So if you haven't yet and you're interested in coming to campus and you fall in that bracket, make sure you check out our website so you can get on campus as well. Without further ado, without me continuing to talk anymore, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Miss Leanne so that she can present you with all things financial aid this evening.
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm assuming, Tracy, if you say yes, then everyone else can.
Yes.
Okay, good. I am actually going to turn off my screen. I wanted to say hi and welcome you and show you my E, and so you know that I'm all on board here. But I don't want to freeze in a weird place, so I'm going to go ahead and stop my video and then share my screen so that we can get this started. So this is going to be questions and answers. So we're already starting to get a lot of questions. It's geared towards first-time families, whether they're a transfer student or a new freshman. It is the same exact question and answer as last Wednesday, the 10th. So if you were present for that Q&A, this may not be as useful to you unless you're just looking for that refresher. We are recording the session this time, so that will be available if you need to refer back to it. But I do just want to reach out to those of you, not that we don't care about you, but if you were here last Wednesday, this is going to be the same presentation, and we just wanted you to be aware of that before we got too far in. So I have been at the university for quite some time. I'm going to get rid of this here, since I'm assuming you can see that. And I think, yeah. So I was awarded an Emerald, and now I have the EFOS. Why? Sorry, I kind of interrupted my introduction. I meant to say I've been at the university as an undergraduate student, a graduate student. I worked in various different departments because I've actually been at Eastern on staff for the last 28 years. I've taught. So all of my colleagues from financial aid, my advising colleagues, are here to answer your questions too. So if you have stuff that's not getting answered, again, as Tracy said, use that Q&A function. We will answer while I present, but this is a sharing of many commonly asked questions. So a lot of students, when they get admitted, notice that they were offered an Emerald Scholarship. And then when they got their financial aid offer in the mail, they don't see the Emerald anymore, and they're seeing this EFOS. So we wanted to explain that. The EFOS is for Pell Grant eligible students. So when you apply to Eastern, you're automatically considered for scholarships, and you don't necessarily have to have that FAFSA on file. And so admissions would have let you know you were admitted and let you know if you qualified for an Emerald Scholarship. But then in financial aid, when we get your FAFSA, we can then determine, oh, this is a Pell Grant eligible student. They now meet the EFOS, which is our Education First Opportunity Scholarship criteria, which is a full tuition scholarship. And so they'll see that that's on there, but not the Emerald. It does replace the Emerald Scholarship. It's not possible to get both awards. But in almost all cases, the EFOS is a more advantageous award for the student. And so that's what we will put in its place. Now, I had, just as an example, a situation with a family who recently reached in, and they're Pell Grant eligible, and their EFOS was $59.49. It was $51 short of what he would have qualified for as his Emerald Scholarship was $6,000. But as I explained to them, EFOS and Pell Grant are going to work together to always cover that 12 credit hours of tuition and the registration fee if you have a 12 credit hour EFOS. And If you have an EFOS that requires 15 credit hours, which I'll talk about in just a moment, you actually get a bigger bang for your buck, so to speak. So it does replace the Emerald Scholarship, and we just like for students to be aware of that. So if you're eligible for the EFOS, the Education First Opportunity Scholarship, that and your Pell Grant combined together to equal the amount of tuition and registration fee for a certain number of credit hours each term. We like to clarify because sometimes folks will just look at the banner. Like I believe if you open up an Eastern banner, sometimes you'd see, actually maybe not anymore now that the deadline has passed, but it might say 3.0 and Pell Grant eligible equals full tuition. And some people read that as full ride. And that's not the case. The EFOS covers just a certain number of credit hours of tuition and the registration fee with the Pell Grant. So they combine and cover that. Room and board is something that's in addition that is not covered at all by either of those awards. So if you live on campus, if and you're going to have to, figure out a way either with other types of financial aid or out-of-pocket payments to cover those room and board costs. We also like to let students know and families know that there are fees that are not covered by EFOS and Pell Grant. So just as an example, you might have to take a science class as part of your liberal arts curriculum, and that might have like a $25 lab fee that's associated with that course. And that would be something that you would be paying out of pocket. The EFOS and the Pell are going to combine to cover, again, either 12 or 15 credit hours of tuition each term. And that would be clarified for you in your award letter or aid offer, which one you have. And does not cover those other fees. All new freshmen are going to have a one-time new student fee their first semester, and that's not covered. So we just like folks to know that we're not trying to hide anything. It is a full tuition and registration fee scholarship, but there are sometimes additional things that aren't covered, and we like everyone to just be aware of that. If you qualify for EFOS, you will receive not only that notification in your aid offer of whether it requires 12 or 15 credit hours, but we'll also follow up with a EFOS welcome letter. So that'll probably come in the next 30 to 60 days if you qualify for EFOS, and just explain all the terms and conditions of that. So if you have an Emerald Scholarship, all of our Emerald Scholarships require just 12 credit hours each fall and winter term. You can register for more, but you only have to be full-time. And full-time at Eastern is a 12 credit hour course load. The EFOS, again, is going to require 12 or 15, and that notification will come to let you know which one you have. They are only paid in fall and winter terms, so that's the EFOS or the Emerald. Neither one of them are available ever for summer enrollment. So again, we like to be upfront and let folks know that that isn't something that you can expect in summer terms. You're welcome to enroll in summer terms. If you are a Pell Grant eligible student, it is very likely that you will qualify for Pell Grant funding, but the EFOS would not be there to augment any summer tuition. It would just be your Pell Grant. And then if you had student loan eligibility or some other means to pay the rest of the tuition balance out of pocket, you can do that. So one of the questions we get a lot is, can I keep the Emerald instead of the EFOS? Again, I was giving the example of a family who noticed, oh, my Emerald was 6,000 and this says 59.49. And what I explained to that family is, again, the EFOS is almost always a more advantageous award. That student qualified for a 12 credit hour EFOS, and that's something that a student can receive for 5 years, which is not true of the Emerald Scholarship or the 15 credit hour EFOS. So that's an advantage that that student would receive that might make, even though this first year it looks like the Emerald is more, might make it a more advantageous award for that family. If you would like to keep your Emerald Scholarship in place of the EFOS, you have one point in time where you can make that decision, and that's prior to your first fall semester. So you cannot switch back and forth between the two scholarship programs as you matriculate through EMU. But if for some reason it makes more sense for you, you do have that option before you start. And you can do that by simply sending an email with your EID number to fa_scholarships@emisha.edu. We'll make sure that you are understanding what, that change means and that it's a permanent move. Um, but again, some students might have a 15 credit hour EFOS and they really need the flexibility to only take 12 credit hours. And those folks might want to then opt into that original Emerald scholarship. So we like folks to know that that is an option that you have. So the follow-up question to that will be, well, if I have the 15 credit hour EFOS, couldn't I just change to the 12-hour EFOS? And no, that is not possible. You're awarded based on your admissions criteria. So if you were in that 3 to 3.49 GPA range and you have Pell Grant eligibility, we would have awarded you a 24 credit EFOS. So that EFOS and Pell Grant will cover 12 credit hours each fall and winter semester for up to 5 years. It will not, if you enroll in 15 credit hours, it will not move up. It stays at that amount. However, it gives you the option, to take more credits if you want to, and then you would just be paying for that through other means. So you're not limited to 12 credit hours, but that's all that that award will pay for. The 30 credit hour EFOS is awarded to students who are Pell Grant eligible and have a 3.5 or higher high school GPA. And the expectation is that those students will be able to matriculate potentially in 4 years with 15 credit hours a semester. And so that's what that award pays. And again, that's 8 semesters of fall and winter consecutive enrollment. It isn't possible to take a year off and then recapture it later. Both scholarships and including the Emerald Scholarship, which is not on this chart, all 3 of those awards will require a 2.75 GPA and what we call SAP. We really like our acronyms in financial aid, and SAP stands for Satisfactory Academic Progress. So in addition to having to maintain this 2.75 GPA threshold, students with an Emerald or either credit hour EFOS will have to meet satisfactory academic progress, which has a quantitative and qualitative component. So the quantitative is you have to be completing at least 67% of the credits that you attempt. So if you had to withdraw from half your classes, that would give you only a 50% completion rate. You'd be under that threshold. And so you'd receive a warning. And then if you are able to resolve that overall completion rate, you could move forward. But just a quick, explanation of what that SAP acronym means, so that everyone's aware since it's on the chart here. So what happens if I'm EFOS eligible this year, but next year I'm not Pell Grant eligible? You just said that I can't move back and forth between Emerald and EFOS, so do I just lose my scholarship? The answer is no. If a student is not Pell Grant eligible in a future aid year, but they're maintaining all the other requirements for an EFOS, GPA, SAP, full-time enrollment, we will just automatically switch you to your original Emerald scholarship for that year. So that's the only case where it's possible to kind of go back and forth between awards. And that's really because it's due to FAFSA information. It's not based on personal preference. It's based on that Pell Grant eligibility, which is a requirement of EFOS. And we certainly don't want anyone who loses Pell Grant eligibility to just automatically lose their scholarship as well. So if for some reason you're EFOS eligible and in any future year you're no longer Pell eligible, we will revert you back to the Emerald Scholarship as long as you're meeting all of those other conditions. And again, if you're eligible for EFOS, That's going to be a follow-up letter that you'll get probably in the next 30 to 60 days that explains all of EFOS versus Emerald eligibility and what it takes to maintain eligibility for that full tuition scholarship each year. It also will have our email address. And so we really encourage students to hang on to that. It's your responsibility as a student to know what your scholarship requirements are. As much as possible, your academic advisor or your departmental advisors are going to try and ask you questions about that and help you as you enroll in classes. But ultimately, it's the student's responsibility to know. So if you say you have an EFOS, you need to know, does your scholarship require 12 or 15 credit hours? You can't necessarily just know that your academic advisor is privy to the same information that we might have in financial aid. So you might want to hang on to that letter. So I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. I've talked a lot about EFOS and Emerald. Certainly, if you continue to have questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A box. But I'm going to kind of switch gears into the process of verification because that's can be a confusing or a learning curve for folks that are new to federal financial aid at the college level. So verification is the process of making sure that what you submitted on the FAFSA is accurate. And so when your FAFSA comes into us, it may come in with a flag, and that's a flag from the federal government, the Department of Education, that says, all right, Office of Financial Aid at EMU, you need to double check this person's FAFSA and make sure that everything that they put in was correct. Doesn't necessarily mean that you did anything wrong when you completed the FAFSA. It just means that you fall into one of the federal groups that they are asking schools to check. So typically, if you're selected for verification, that's going to be anywhere that you're applying. So my own two daughters, I have three kids in college, but one will gratefully be moving on in life. The other two, I know, are selected for verification. And so anywhere they're thinking about going to school, we're going to have to submit verification documents potentially. And so we want to talk to you about that. All documentation that we request from students is going to be something available to them through their My EMISH or EMU account. We also send a paper letter. So as soon as we know you're selected, we send a paper letter. Many of you may have actually gotten your verification letters even before your aid offer. And that's fine. They can come in any kind of order. But that verification letter comes and tells you, okay, these are the things that we need to have, the documents that have to be submitted for us to review. If you misplace that letter, we will also kindly continue to send you many, many email requests until you submit the documentation. And the other thing that we'll do is that's always available to you as a student in your EMU account. So you'll look there to see, okay, do I need to submit anything? And what do I have to submit? And we're going to talk about how you see that. It is possible that verification can change your aid eligibility. And so for that reason, we will prevent any financial aid from paying until your documents are submitted, until they're reviewed, and the verification process is complete. So it's really important that if you have documentation, you get it into us. Because if you have documentation out there, sure, we're going to tell you that you're eligible for an EFOS and a Pell Grant, but nothing can pay until that's submitted and reviewed. So if you were to be selected for verification, and initially your FAFSA said you were Pell Grant eligible, but maybe you made a mistake when you submitted the FAFSA, and we then get your information and correct that mistake. Again, the process is the same. We will put you back into your original Emerald Award. We're not going to just completely remove scholarship eligibility simply because you made a mistake and you're not actually Pell eligible when you filled out the FAFSA. So it's another reason that's just really important that you get documents submitted as soon as you can so that we have that opportunity to review your file and you have an accurate expectation of what your aid is going to be and what it will cover. So how do you access these documents? in that letter that we send that lets you know about the verification process, these steps are outlined. So again, if you have that, it can be helpful to refer back to that. But in case you misplace it, or if any point you misplace it, you always have access to this as the student in your My eMish account. So you'll click on the student tab, and then you'll go to the financial aid tab. You'll select eligibility, and then you'll be asked to select the aid year. And so for this upcoming school year, you're going to select fall 21 to summer 22. And then you'll look at what is needed under student requirements. So student requirements will show a couple of things. They'll show not received, received but not reviewed, or they might show satisfied. So not yet received is that status that everyone is in before they submit documents to us. When we receive a document, it flips, that particular requirement flips to received but not reviewed. We will not review any documents until all documents are submitted. So again, it's a learning curve. So a family and a student might submit a dependent verification worksheet or a verification worksheet for dependent students. You'll see it represented both ways. That document could come in, but we're not going to look at it until we've also received, the accompanying tax forms that might be required. And so we just like, again, for folks to know that. It is normal if you're somebody who submitted your documents very, very early, maybe you've already done this. It is completely normal for that to show as received but not reviewed for a number of weeks, especially here at the beginning of our verification process, because we have, a backlog of things that we need to get in and review. So as long as they show received but not reviewed, you're in good shape. You've done what you need to do, and now you're just waiting on us to do what we need to do. However, if anything shows not yet received, if anything gets flipped to maybe a status like incomplete, you're going to want to make sure that you're following up on that. And that's, again, something that you can look at any time through your EMU account. So I mentioned the dependent verification worksheet, and I mentioned a tax form. So those are pretty common documents that we might be requesting, and we want you to understand how forms work at Eastern. So all of our forms for verification are online, and the student accesses them by going in through their EMU account portal to fill out their sections of the form. When a student gets done with their portion of the form, it will say, or it'll prompt them to provide a parent's email address so that we can then send a link to that form out to the parent for them to complete the parent sections of the same form. Parent and student cannot use the same email address. So we just like for you to know that up front. It's really important. So sometimes a student might be like, well, I'll just, fill out this form for my mom and I'll use my email. That's not going to work. It needs to be the student filling out their portion and then the parent filling out their portion. The same is true. Sometimes parents are really eager and they know that students are busy, and so they want to help them. And so the parent will start the student's form because they've got their login information and they'll go in their account. And then they won't realize, that there's going to be a parent section to fill out. And they can't use necessarily the same email address to get to that form. So that's the process for how the online forms work. And if for some reason a parent is able to get into their form, we want to talk a little bit about that. So when you're in the verification worksheet, again, it's a form that's designed to be filled out by a student and a parent. So parents have certain information they fill out and students have certain information that they fill out. So if you can't click in a field, that means it's not something for you to fill out. It's for that other individual to fill out. And so we, again, just like to make sure that students and parents are aware of that. So students are going to be asked to put in household information, and you might make a mistake. You might not include somebody that's supposed to be included. And so when the parent gets to their section, they do have the option to edit that if needed. Now, sometimes, again, we can run into errors or user issues because this might be a new process. And so we kind of just want to troubleshoot some common errors. If you're getting an error that says, especially authentication error, it might be because, for instance, if I were to have my daughter do her form for Eastern on my computer and then send me the link, and then I open up my email and click on that link, my computer might still recognize that she's logged in as an Eastern student and default to that. So if you're getting an error, try using a private browser or a separate device, or if you know how to, an incognito window on your computer to get into that form. Again, make sure that the browser isn't automatically defaulting to a student's EMU email if you and your parent are using the same device. And then, if all else fails, you've tried opening another browser, you've tried, uh, you're positive you've used different email addresses and that's not the issue. Definitely contact our office for additional assistance at that point in time, and we'll see what we can do to help you. We have somebody in our office who is able to resend a link if needed. Um, but most issues that folks run into are, what we call user error. Doesn't mean that, you're a bad person or a stupid person or anything like that. It's just, might be your first time doing this. And these are just some typical troubleshooting issues that can help get you through the process. Okay, so actually, before I move on to what I'm going to call like a third portion here, the other thing I want to say about forms is that you'll notice one of the forms that anyone with federal financial aid has is this authorization to pay form. So that's again an online form that you'll fill out, but every student will have that. So every student with federal financial aid will have that form. So some students might be selected for verification and have to turn in a verification worksheet and parent or student tax forms. And some students might not be selected for verification at all, so they don't have to turn in anything like that. But all students with federal aid will have this authorization to pay form. And that online form is something that a student will fill out to let us know how they want their financial aid to apply. So the short of it is that financial aid can only pay toward tuition, room, board, educational expenses on your bill. There are things that are not considered an educational expense. So let's say I lose my ID and I have to get a replacement ID. That might be a $16 or a $20 fee that will go on my student account. But my financial aid cannot pay that unless I have authorized my financial aid to pay towards other charges by completing the authorization to pay form saying, yes, it's okay. And there isn't a right or wrong answer. If you say yes, then that means when your financial aid pays, it's going to pay to any amount that's on your bill. If you say no, or you were to never complete that form, then we will only apply your federal financial aid to tuition, room, board, fees, things like that, um, that are educationally related. And so you might have a $16 or $20 ID replacement fee that doesn't get touched. And that's because you haven't said yes by authorizing that. And so all that means then is that you would have to go in and make a payment towards that charge. You're still responsible for it. It's just that if you don't fill out the form or you say no, you're telling us, don't apply my financial aid to this charge. I will pay it separately. And the reason that we prompt that form for everyone with federal aid is just so that they understand how it works. Because without that, sometimes a student could get a credit balance refunded to them and not realize, oh, I still owe for something on my account, because my financial aid, couldn't just automatically pay it without my permission. So the third thing I want to talk about, as a frequently asked question, is federal work study and just getting jobs on campus in general. Because this is a common question that we can get from first-time students and families. So I have federal work study. What does that mean? So if you have been offered federal work study, that would be on your aid offer letter. And again, if you have gotten that but misplaced it or haven't received it yet, your federal work study eligibility is always available to you in your EMU account. When you go to student tab and then the financial aid tab, and then you go to the award tab and pick the award year, you'll see it there if you are eligible for it. If you don't see it, that means that you don't qualify for federal work study this first year at Eastern. Does that mean you can't work on campus or have a job related to campus? Absolutely not. You can work on campus without federal work study. It just means you're going to have different job options than somebody with federal work study, and you'll be paid through different funding. So, my recommendation to students who have federal work study is to think about, okay, where, if I could work anywhere on campus, where would I want to work? And this says you could call the departments that you're interested in, but obviously, in this kind of remote COVID environment, it may make more sense to get an email for someone in the department and make an inquiry that way, just in case, calls aren't being answered, in the way that they might typically be. The other thing you can do is use the handshake portal through UACDC, and this is to identify both work study and what we call regular student employment positions. And so you can follow these links to do that. You can also get to it through your eMish account, the handshake portal, that is. But not always we try to encourage departments to list positions on handshake, but they don't always do that. A lot of departments will have students work for them, for their entire 4 years. And then maybe just that student makes a recommendation of a new student coming in. And so they don't even really need to advertise their positions for federal work study. So don't get frustrated if you don't see something there. Things are constantly being added in that portal and taken down. So just like in the real world, finding a job is sometimes a full-time job. If you have work study, or even if you don't, and you want to look for a regular student employment position on campus, we encourage you to keep going back and checking that on a regular basis because it's not static, it is dynamic. And so things will be added and removed. And so just because you don't see anything listed one day doesn't mean that, there might not be 3 or 4 or 8 things listed, the next day. So if you have federal work study, what that means is you have been offered a set amount of funding that you will receive in a bi-weekly paycheck. That means it is not paying directly to your student account. If you see a $3,000 federal work study award, that means in fall semester, you can earn up to $1,500 in a federal work study position. And then in winter semester, the same thing. Usually that comes out to about 6 to 10 hours of work a week. And so a lot of times people might be reticent to work because, well, let's just focus on being a student. I don't want to add work into there. But 6 to 10 hours a week is a really reasonable amount of time for students to work. And that's why we design the federal work study awards the way we do, so that we're kind of limiting you to that, because that a lot of times just gives students enough to manage in their schedule to really create time management versus, if you only have classes once a day, or maybe they're all online and they're self-paced. Without that work study position, you might find yourself with a lot of free time and have a harder time managing your time versus if you've got that 6 to 10 hour job in there, it takes up enough space that, you really have to find the time to study and make sure that, you're working. It also gives you the opportunity to make contacts on campus. And again, a lot of students really thrive by having that part-time position. So federal work study, typically you work 6 to 10 hours a week. And then once you use or earn your whole work study award in the form of a biweekly paycheck, then you're done. And then you can start working, in a future semester when you have that. For regular student employment, you might have the ability to work a few more hours. I believe students can work a maximum of 29 hours a week. We don't necessarily encourage that much, but that would be the maximum. Um, and that's something to know that you have that ability. So federal work study will come to you in the form of a biweekly paycheck, doesn't pay directly to your bill, and any student employment will work the same way. Um, there are positions on campus. That might be a common thing that people are wondering about. We have both students who have been able to work remotely for some departments. There is remote work that can be done. And then for other students, they're actually working on campus, whether that's in dining, whether that's in the Rec IM, which is, our facility on campus for students to work out. Or they might even just be a monitor at the building, to make sure that everyone has the green light, on their COVID. That's something that, has been a new position that's been created by this. So that's a bit about how that works. I wanted to pause here before I get too much into this slide, because there's been some folks I think that are asking about, well, okay, if I have an EFOS and my tuition is covered, how am I supposed to pay my room and board if that's not covered? And that's why if you've applied for federal financial aid, which you would if you have an EFOS, you have student loan offers and potentially also a parent loan offer that you can use to help you with that. And then certainly you can also make out-of-pocket payments. So it's just going to depend on you, and it's a conversation that you're going to want to have with the folks that are supporting you on this journey, whether that's mom and dad, or different people, different family members or friends. We provide that aid offer so you have a reasonable expectation of costs, and again, an understanding of what's going to be left to pay. So if you're looking at a letter, you'll see, okay, here's your costs, and then here's your scholarship or grant aid that you don't have to pay back in a second section. And then we do the math for you, what's left to cover. And then that's where at the bottom of your letter, we would provide, again, those loan options, or certainly you always have those out-of-pocket payment options. And I will talk about that in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides. But I got a text that was coming up a lot for folks, so I wanted to just address that. Is there a deadline for accepting financial aid? May 1st is considered sort of like still traditionally decision day for colleges, but we don't have a deadline per se. If you wanted to be considered for EFOS, I will say that you did have to have your FAFSA filed and be admitted by the 15th of February. So there was a deadline for being awarded, but we put any scholarships or grants automatically in accepted status. So you don't have to take any action on a grant or a scholarship, but you would if you want to borrow a loan, or if you would like to take advantage of federal work study if you've been offered that. That's where, again, through your EMU portal and instructions come on the aid offer, you have the option to go in and determine what you want to accept. In order for any loans that you plan to accept to pay towards your account, again, if you have documentation that needs to be submitted, it needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be processed. You'd also have to complete what's called entrance counseling and a master promissory note. That's what that MPN stands for. So federal loans require that students go through entrance counseling and sign a master promissory note. The loans are limited. They are up to $5,500 for a new freshman, and up to $3,500 of that could be subsidized depending on federal need. You would be able to see those loan offers again on that aid offer letter that came in the mail, and then you would go into your EMU account to take action if you decide to accept those. We recommend, if you plan on accepting loans, that you have everything completed by July. So for students, that means entrance counseling and a master promissory note. And for parents, That means if you're going to take out the parent loan, which again is just an option for you, that you've accepted that or the student has accepted that through their account, but also that as a parent, you've completed the requirements. And that is to do an application at the federal website. Those will open up May 1st, most likely. So May 1st, the 21-22 parent loan application should open up on the federal website. And then parents at that point can apply for a loan. They'll know right away if they're approved or denied. If they get approved, it pushes the parent on to sign a master promissory note. And then the parent is taking out that loan to help pay off a student's bill. If for some reason a parent goes through that process and they get denied, we do get that information, and that does allow us to cancel a parent loan and offer a student a finite amount of additional unsubsidized loan funding. So that's again something to talk through as a family. If you've got parents that are helping you on this journey, and you can talk about the situation and whether or not they think they would be approved or denied. Essentially, if you have good credit, you'd be approved for a parent loan as a parent. And if your credit is not good, you may very likely not be approved. And that's how that process works. And then we kind of take it from there. If a parent signs a promissory note, then we'll process the parent loan if it's been approved. And again, if a parent applies and is denied, we can then offer a new loan to the student that may or may not be enough to cover all of those room and board charges. But again, the latest to accept and complete these requirements, if you want them before you are billed, is by the end of June, because in July, we'll be able to generate bills. And when we send those out, they come with the option of doing a 5-payment plan for free. So when the bill comes in July, it'll be exact. It will no longer be estimated figures. It'll be exact figures. And then a student has the option to determine at that point if they want to opt into a fee-free 5-payment plan. And they'd have to make a 20% payment in July, and then they have the option to make August, September, October, November payments. I said option, it's not an option. You have to pay. But the payment plan itself is optional. So if you want the federal loans that you have accepted to show up on that first billing statement and be counted, it's important that everything's done by the end of June. That said, the latest to accept and complete requirements is actually within the term itself. So let's say you're a student with an EFOS and you're commuting, so you don't have any room or board charges to worry about, and you get your bill and your tuition and your Pell Grant and your EFOS are combining and they're covering your tuition and the registration fee. And maybe all you have to pay is like $325, right? Maybe it's your new student fee, and the Rec IM fee and a lab fee for a class, right? This is just an example scenario. And so you might have that to pay when the bill is due in September. And so you don't sign up for a payment plan. You just wait till the bill is due in September and you make a payment. But then maybe your computer breaks down or you have a problem with your car if you're commuting, and you find yourself in a situation where you want to take out one of those loans. Your bill is paid, but maybe you want to accept now some loan funding that you didn't plan on accepting so that you can get a refund of a credit balance on your account to help pay for that new computer, or again, like some car repairs or something. So you could still do that in October. You could still accept a loan, complete the counseling, and complete a master promissory note into the term like that. But again, if you want it to pay towards your bill before you make payments or before it's due, you're going to want to have that done well by the end of June, well before the semester starts. All right, so the final thing I want to talk about is two particular things that are important to us in financial aid as we see them as a kind of sort of regular hiccup that if they're not taken care of, folks might experience. So the first thing is, it's not something, unfortunately, you can be proactive about. You are required to have a final high school transcript with your graduation date sent to EMU after you've earned your high school diploma. So again, you can't really be proactive about this. There's no point in having a transcript sent now because it's going to be a 6th semester or a 7th semester transcript. We need to see your graduation date on it. So whether or not, COVID impacts your ability to walk across a stage, at some point, your high school is going to confirm your graduation, and we need a transcript that shows that. So if you order those through parchment, if it's something that you need to contact your counselor or guidance counseling office about, you want to make sure that you're doing that so that they know you're coming to Eastern and that gets sent over and shows that you've graduated. This is kind of actually the final step in being admitted to EMU, but we talk about it in financial aid because it's so important and it will hold up your financial aid. We cannot and will not disperse any funding until we have that final high school transcript for incoming freshmen. So if you get that billing statement in July and there's no financial aid on it, and you're sure you've done all of your requirements, you've turned in all your documents, you've completed entrance counseling and a master promissory note, this could very well be the reason you're not seeing aid. Because we have to have that transcript to disperse or authorize aid. So really important that you make a mental note of this and that you get this sent in as soon as possible, because we can't even pay an Emerald scholarship, right? So if you're somebody who's like, well, I'm not going to apply for federal financial aid anyway, this doesn't apply to me. Yes, it does. Can't pay any aid until we have that final high school transcript. And then the last thing we want to talk about is the FERPA release form. If you were to just put in this acronym, FERPA, stands for Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. It's a federal law. It's not an Eastern policy. And it says once a student enrolls in classes, is registered in classes, the university, the college, whatever the case is not allowed to talk to anyone else besides their account. It's your private information. That said, many of you are going to have parents, family members, mentors, whatever the case may be, helping you on this journey. And you want them to be able to talk about your account with us. You want them to be able to ask questions, to advocate for you. And that is why it's really important to complete this release form as soon or before you've registered for classes. So right now, if you were to call in as a parent and you've got this aid offer in front of you, I'm going to be able to talk to you and I'm going to help you through that process. But as soon as your student gets registered in a class at Eastern, I can't anymore. And trust me, I'm a parent. I want to be able to talk to you, but I can't unless they've completed a release form and it's on file for you specifically. So students, this is a hyperlink. I don't know if it'll work, once this thing gets recorded. If not, just go to the emish.edu webpage, type in FERPA in the search box. The first hit that should come up is records and registration website. That is the registrar is who holds these forms and processes these forms and puts these forms into the system so that all the rest of us in the various departments know that it's okay to talk to, again, a family member, a mentor, an aunt, a guardian, whoever the case may be about this individual or this student's account in detail. Other than that, we're only going to be able to answer general questions for you. And we realize that can be frustrating, especially when you're trying to help someone pay a bill. So make sure, students, that that's something that you get on file. It is something that the student fills out. So again, parents, encourage your students to get these filed. And if when you pull up the form, it has the email address on it, students can bring them in person, but probably the easiest and quickest and most efficient, effective way to get them processed is to use the email on the form and send it back to registrar@emish.edu. And they will let you know if there's a problem with the form. It's really important that it be filled out correctly. So if there's any issues, you want to make sure that you've taken care of that. All right, this is our contact information. I'm gonna kind of leave that up there right now, but I'm gonna take a moment to be done vomiting information on you because I know that was a lot of stuff. And I will just ask if there's anything that Tracy wants to follow up with. If there's been some commonly asked questions that she thinks are worth pointing out, I will just let her at this point go ahead and take over.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leanne. That was an awesome information, and we had a lot of great questions throughout the presentation. As a reminder, like Leanne said, feel free to reach out to us. We are here to help. We want to make sure that you get your questions answered, and don't be afraid to ask questions, because that's the best thing that you can do for yourself when you're trying to make decisions. We were working through some questions for students tonight, and I think that, again, super beneficial for people to just put out there what their expectations are, and what's, what do we have that we can help you with. I know there were some people that joined us late, so I just want to reiterate that we have gone live for on-campus tours. If you are interested in scheduling one, be sure to check us out at emich.edu/visit. So that you can schedule a time to come to campus. Again, it will be limited to students that are admitted and coming to, planning to come to Eastern or trying to come to Eastern for summer of 2021 or fall of 2021. But we do also have a wait list for students that might be juniors or sophomores that are starting their process with us. To kind of wrap up, I will go ahead and put my contact information in the chat as well, so that you have it. As the senior admissions advisor, I'd love to answer any questions that you have about your application process or where you're at. And if you need anything from us, again, feel free to reach out. We are here to help. As we wrap up here this evening, we hope that this has been beneficial to you. We hope to be able to offer more events like this. There's a whole Flying Home e-series that we have offered for students that are still trying to make that decision. Be sure to check us out on our website, follow us on socials. And if you, again, need anything, you can reach out to us via email, text, or give us a phone call. We'd be happy to chat with you.
Hey, Tracy, you might have just answered this. I was kind of looking at questions and answers, but I know a lot of folks have been asking like where they can review this. I'm assuming that we'll post it eventually to our website, but will admissions have that up anywhere either as well?
I would have to check with our visit programs director, Misty. She's the one that kind of is able to repost and send some of this out, but I can certainly check with her.
Okay. And I would just say to all of you that are asking, as soon as I can't give you like a specific time where it will be available, but our policy in financial aid is as soon as something is wrapped up and we have it saved and we're ready to post it, we will post it on our website. So that's just emich.edu, and then it's F as in financial, IN as in Nancy, AID. So FinAid, FINAID. And if for some reason that doesn't work, certainly just go to the EMU website and navigate to the financial aid page. And we have a place there where we save all of our webinars and, things of this nature so folks can refer back to it.
Perfect. And I know, Leanne, that you guys have some additional like videos and stuff that you have posted as well, right? Like just some shorter.
Yeah, we have a lot of tutorials.
Well.
So like
Right.
if folks are getting stuck on like, how do I accept my aid, or what does this aid offer mean? I'm still kind of having a hard time. We do have a couple little tutorials.
Awesome. And I guess now that I'm kind of thinking about it, some of the other things that we get asked is, students trying to access on your eMich account, you will be able to access that to be able to see your aid. Reminder that it does take some time to process. So if you're asking us and we can see that we've got your FAFSA, but we don't quite have you packaged yet, be patient with us. It does take time to do that, but it will come available to that, and it will be there for you. With that, I know we have a bunch of questions still in the chat and in the Q&A that we're working through. But this evening, we are so thankful that you joined us. And we hope that you will be on campus with us soon, and that we will see you this summer or this fall. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to meeting you.